We will now join Little Hands Design London and Haileybury, Almaty for SDGs in Stories. Georgie and Astrid take us through embedding the sustainable development goals in the curriculum focused on developing emotional and social understanding and resilience. They are harnessing the positive and emotive potential of storytelling to engage with complex issues at a time of rising eco-anxiety.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today to learn about our approach in making the Sustainable Development Goals engaging within schools. I'm Georgie, the Director of Little Hands Design, a charity teaching and designing and learning with people how we can lead a more sustainable life with the help of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals provides us a framework to work towards a sustainable future. They are a set of 17 goals that show how everything we do in the world is connected and how what we do here, where we live, can have a serious effect on the other side of the world and our future. These goals have been decided upon almost 200 heads of state at the United Nations in 2015. It was hoped that these goals would have been achieved by 2030, but it looks like not all goals are on track. For that reason, the decade from 2020 to 2030 is now called the Decade of Action. For decades, scientists have warned us the way that we live is destroying the world that we are living in. More than ever, we are at a critical point, with time running out. Why are we not committing ourselves fully within everything that we are doing in achieving these goals? At Little Hands Design, we have over many years discussed, learned and experimented with regards to this dilemma through the lens of fashion and textiles. The fashion industry is one of the most polluting industries, and over the last 10 to 15 years, we as consumers have started treating clothes like disposable products through the phenomenon known as fast fashion. We know this is not good, but we are still hesitant about changing the way we produce and consume and relate to each other in terms of what we wear. Let's find out from our founder, Astrid, who is now working at Haileybury School in Kazakhstan.
Thank you very much, Georgie, and hello to London from Haileybury School, the British school in Kazakhstan. Now, Georgie was talking about the dilemma that although we often know that what we often do harms ourselves and the environment, we're still hesitant to fully commit to actively change our behavior. Now, we believe that one of the answers to solve that dilemma lies within the way we educate ourselves and we educate others. On the one hand, we learn a lot of facts, gain a lot of knowledge in school in different subjects, but do we always connect the dots between them? And how do we connect to our emotions, given that it is, after all, our feelings which determine much of our behavior? And on the other hand, the issues around climate crisis and sustainability are often so complex and serious that we feel overwhelmed. What can we as little people do? How do we keep optimistic? How do we keep keen to be engaged? And what is even the right type of engagement for us as individuals, as schools, as organizations, as communities? Now, throughout history, people have used stories to connect, to remain hopeful, to feel they belong, to pass on wisdom and a deep understanding of what is right and what is wrong. So we thought, what if we use that with regards to the Sustainable Development Goals? And we connected with two professional storytellers, Marion Leeper in the UK and Tanya Butt in New Zealand, and through their inexhaustible knowledge of a wealth of traditional folk tales from all over the world, from many different cultures, have been able to pinpoint 17 to rewrite to help us connect to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm now delighted to be able to share a message from Haileybury's headmaster, Mr. Simon Mills, and he will also read out an example of one of these stories, and let's see whether you can work out which SDG the story is referring to.
Well, it's wonderful to be outside, just next to the school, in the gardens, next to the Tian Shan Mountains and the Essentai River. These are the things that make Kazakhstan and Almaty very special places, and we want to keep them special. As part of the school, we're now fully committed to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them. These are truly amazing and very important targets for all governments and all organisations to commit to. And we hope that we'll be bringing up our children to respect them and to know them. Each month we're going to take one sustainable development goal and explain it and ask our children to interpret it. And that way we'll embed them within our community. We're working very seriously now towards a green flag and making sure that we are the greenest school in Central Asia. These are important targets and ones that we hope that you will join in as families with. Sustainable Development Goal 10, Reducing Inequality. The Hungry Coat. There are many stories about Nasreddin Hoja. He is the wise fool, philosopher and trickster who used humour to point to the ironies, injustices and contradictions of life. Mullah Nasreddin Hoja was born in a region now known as Turkey in the 13th century. To this day, Hoja, which means teacher, told stories every year. And every year, the International Nasreddin Hoja Festival is held in July in Turkey. It's attended by people from all walks of life to keep the spirit of Nasreddin Hoja alive. Hoja was returning from a long day toiling in the fields. He was hot, his clothes sweat-soaked, and his hands, face and clothes ground with dirt. He was tired and hungry as he'd been fasting for Ramadan and was looking forward to his evening meal. As he walked along the road to his home, he saw ahead of him a crowd of people gathering outside the home of the village's wealthiest man. Hoja joined the crowd, who were all dressed in their finest clothes, and asked what was happening. "We've been invited to break our fast in this fine house," he was told. Hoja was delighted. As he waited to be admitted, he thought of all the fine food that he would eat that night. When it was Hoja's turn to be seated, he was given a place at the far end of the table. Other guests stared at his shabby clothes and his dirty appearance and refused to talk to him. Suddenly, Hoja's appetite left him. He felt uncomfortable and unwelcome, and he stood up from the table and left the feast. Reaching his home, he washed and dressed himself in his finest clothes and his most expensive coat, and then returned to the feast. This time, when he was greeted, he was given a place to sit next to the host, and everyone greeted him warmly. But as the plates of food were passed to Hoja, instead of filling his plate, he took the food and began to fill the pockets of his coat, muttering to himself, "Enjoy," and "Eat, coat, eat." His strange behaviour caught the attention of others at the feast. "What on earth are you doing, Hoja?" his fellow guests exclaimed. "Why, I'm feeding my coat," replied Hoja, emptying a plate of falafel into another pocket. "Feeding your coat?" they replied with disbelief. "Why, of course. Obviously my fine coat is the welcome guest at this table. When I came earlier in my work clothes, I was shunned and left to eat alone. So it seems only right it should have its fill." Some questions. Inequalities are rarely as easily removed as our coat. Can you think of any inequalities that other people have to wear all of the time in our society? Why do you think inequalities arise? Hoja challenged and drew attention to the prejudice he experienced through humour. Why do you think he did this? Can you think of other ways we can draw attention to inequalities in society? How do you think the other guests responded to Hoja's explanation? Do you have any ideas how we can support people who experience inequality in our community, and how can we go about changing those inequalities? And maybe, can what we wear create inequalities? Can you think of instances when clothing makes inequality more obvious and where clothing can be used to reduce inequality. Thank you for thinking about these things, and I hope that the discussion you have will be interesting.
I'm now joined by the Deputy Head Academic at Haileybury School, and I've got a list of questions to quiz him about how we at the school are planning to embed the Sustainable Development Goals into our curriculum. Now, Mr Jacoby, why did the school decide to introduce the SDGs?
I think the pressures have been building in schools for a really long time. Over the last years, both pupils and teachers have been asking us to change what we're doing. We have initiatives which range from looking at what we serve in the canteen, our recycling, the use of plastic, to the Fridays for Futures movements and the actions on climate change. We're also working towards an Eco School Award. So I think as a school we just can't ignore these pressures, we have to embrace them, and I think as educators actually we also can't ignore them. We need to take these very seriously and address them. I have to admit, quite embarrassingly, that not much more than a year ago I myself didn't actually know what the SDGs were, and that's in spite of the fact that I've been involved in climate action projects. But once I found out about them, the SDGs have a really embracing nature. They cover so many different areas of the curriculum which would actually be useful for us, and we have the umbrella over it of the United Nations. So I think as a school it's particularly appropriate. We can have students and teachers really finding those areas of interest and passion and then going for them.
And what was their reaction to the story ideas, to introduce the SDGs through stories based on traditional folk tales?
If I'm honest, my first thought was, wow, this is just going to work so well in reception in year one. I could just see the children sitting on the carpet and having a story. However, the more I thought about it, I know that, and I think we all know that the use of parables, folk tales, this is a real way of cultural teaching and culture and religion. And also, you know, even this very simply worded story can have really layers and layers and layers for us to learn from it. So now I think we're just really, really lucky that we actually have already one story for every SDG. And I think launching each SDG through a story opens up that so well with all the natural questions which actually arise from that. So I think it's absolutely excellent.
Right, interesting. And could you tell us a bit more how and why you are proposing that to be a whole school approach, starting from junior all the way up to senior school?
I mean, Haileybury is an all-through school, so we have a junior school and a senior school on the same site. We share the same facilities. I think it therefore doesn't make any sense to actually try and do something different in one school than the other. Now, obviously, in the junior school we have a different way of teaching, and we happen to have a thematic learning system in the junior school. In the senior school we have a silo system, the very traditional faculties and subjects. We're preparing our students for their examinations. So in class, our expectations on what teachers will be doing at different times and in different subjects, that's going to be different. But I think what makes sense is to launch this across the whole school. If the opportunities differ of how we explore this, that's fine. We don't want blanket uniformity, but we have a goal which encompasses everything we're doing.
And can you expand a bit on how this is going to be organized and what you, for example, could advise other schools?
So obviously I'm Deputy Head Academic only for the senior school, so I wouldn't like to go beyond my bounds here, but I can certainly explain my approach. So I think the thing is, when you go to a teacher and you say to them, we'd like you to incorporate something or change something, their first question is, what's going to be the effect on my lessons, my resources, my schemes of work? What am I going to actually have to do? And my answer has been, really, this is very light touch, and we're not expecting actually on a big scale very much. But that very much really depends on all the teachers within the faculties and the different faculties actually working together with this common goal. So my idea is that we have a very light touch approach, and as a pupil, for example, you're going to have a constant set of nudges. So it doesn't matter whether your lesson is in PE or art, history or geography, English or music. In every lesson during your week, there'll be small diversions, digressions and links being made which help you understand the SDG which we're going to be focusing on for that month. Now the key thing is, obviously, that's from the pupil side, but actually this has got to be led by the teachers. So this actually involves the teachers also thinking in their preparation What links can I make? Do I understand what I'm doing? What examples am I actually going to use? So we're asking them also to make these links, and that's actually where the work from the teacher side is going to come in. Now obviously some teachers are absolutely raring to go with a million different ideas, but of course every school will have teachers who are less willing, able or ready to actually embrace this. So what we're using is we're asking departments in faculty meetings to start doing some brainstorming together to help everybody in their department make these links.
I do like the idea of the nudges. As the saying goes, it takes 40 days to get into a habit. And what will be the input of the pupils into all of that?
So I think the initial work obviously has to come from the teachers. I think we know that there's lots and lots of pupils who are very, very keen to be involved, and we know we have some student ambassadors already and we have our eco committee already. What we're really looking for is to start this as a school and then bring the students into this from some of the things that we're already doing as this kind of percolates through the school.
Right. And are there any long-term plans of where to take the school after the introduction of the SDGs?
Well, I mean, obviously, sometimes you know, you in a school, you thinking more than a week ahead is difficult. Certainly, thinking academic years ahead is really difficult. But we have a headmaster, Mr Mills, and he has a very clear stated goal, as you've seen in the video, that we want to make Haileybury the greenest school in Central Asia. So we have a really, really ambitious target, and I think that target is something we're going to be working towards really over years. I think one really good example of this is actually what's happening in Year 4 at the moment, actually in the junior school. So in Year 4 they want to have, and they've been working towards convincing us that they need a wildlife garden outside, and obviously we have lots of outside space, but the problem is at the moment it's very, very difficult for us to identify exactly where we should put it, which is kind of frustrating for them. But if we come at this with a kind of slightly flexible approach, what we've thought about is, actually, can we do something with hydroponics? Can we actually take the outside garden inside and do some really cool stuff with that? So we've got now an agreement that we're going to create a hydroponic garden inside, grow maybe for example, our own salads, and we're going to use Year 4 to actually maybe model that, take that into their classrooms, as well as still working obviously on the external garden. So this is kind of an example where if we remain kind of flexible in our thinking, then we can really, really go forward with this in a very interesting way. And I think for us, you know, setting ambitious targets is great, but actually we're not really working towards a set of fixed goals. What we really are, we're kind of on a process. And actually the really exciting thing is, like for example with the Year 4s, seeing what kind of develops as part of that process.
That sounds very exciting. It sounds like changing a culture. Thank you very much, Mr Jacoby.
Pleasure.
Done?
Done.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was all right.